Hi, my name is Alexander Bitz. This is another tutorial from unitycookie.com. On this video we will be covering how to create a countdown timer with Unity 3D using JavaScript. This tutorial is also meant for beginners with a bit of JavaScript programming experience. If you've never programmed before, I can recommend you to check out the introduction and scripting tutorials. You can find them on the Unity Cookie page. Just search for Introduction to Scripting. So this is how our final result will look like. We will have a timer with a nice font applied, and it's counting backwards, and it will pause the game when it gets 0. Before we get started, let me explain how the final scene is built up. We'll have two main objects, a GUI text and a main camera. Onto this GUI text we will attach our self-written script. You see, you can enter in the inspector panel your seconds and your minutes you want to count back. Let me show you the script to give you a short overview. At a glance, this is how our script will look like. We will have three main areas. At the top we will declare all our variables. In the function awake we will set our start time, and we will convert the minutes from the inspector panel, right here, also into seconds. And in our function on GUI we will format our string properly, and we will also check if our seconds and our minutes are getting 0, then we will pause the game. Let's get started by creating a new project. So go back to Unity and go to the File menu. Choose File, New Project. You can rename it to something like Countdown Timer. And we don't need to import any of the following packages. Just choose Create. Unity will reopen, and by default we are getting a main camera, but we also need a GUI text. The GUI text will display our remaining time. The benefit of using a GUI text instead of an on-GUI label is that we can move it by grabbing it in the 3D space, and we can edit its properties in the inspector panel. You can create a GUI text by going to the game objects, create other menu, and choose GUI text. If you want, you can change the anchor point. The anchor point is responsible for where our whole object is centered. So if we change this one to middle center, our whole object will be centered in this view. And if we furthermore want to center this text in this object, we could change the alignment. So change the alignment to center and you will notice the text will be centered. Furthermore, we could increase the font size to something about, let's say 20, or you could make it even bigger if you wish. So like this, for example. The last thing we have to create in Unity is our JavaScript. We can create it by going to the Assets, Create menu, and choose JavaScript. Now we can rename our JavaScript to something like Countdown Timer Script. If you want, you can organize everything in folders. This makes sense with larger projects. You can open the script by double-clicking. By default you are getting a function start and a function update. For this script we don't need any of them. We will be using a function awake, which is quite similar to the function start, but it is called before function start. That's why a function awake is mainly used to initialize variable or game states even before the game starts. So we can delete this function update and rename our function start to function awake. Next we have to declare a private variable called initial time. In this variable we will store the time when the timer started. You can create a private variable by typing private var, and we will name it initial time. Now make a double point. We will make it of type float because the function time we will use is returning always float values. So it's best to make this one in the same type. In our function awake, we can now initialize our new variable by setting it to the actual time. You can get the actual time by using the time function. So write a capital T dot with a small and then a small t for time. This statement will set the actual time to this variable. Further, we have to create two more public variables, which will work as our input values. By making them public, we are later able to tweak their values in the inspector panel. We will name them count minutes and count seconds. You can create a public variable by just writing var and then the name of your variable and the type. And we will make them of type integer. So I will save this, and you see, if we now attach our script to the GUI text, we would be able to enter some values here. This is only because we made it public. So go back to our function awake. We now have to convert the minutes into seconds by multiplying them with 6t and add the count seconds. This step is necessary because the time function is also counted in seconds and not in minutes and seconds. We will multiply the count minutes by 60 and add them to the count seconds and save this value also in our count seconds variable. Now we have to create another function, a function on GUI. This function is normally used for rendering and handling GUI events. Our GUI text is such a GUI element. The function on GUI is called every frame. You can create this function by typing function on with a capital O and then GUI also in capital letters. In this function we will add a new variable called GUI time. This variable will be the difference between our time.time in every cycle of this function and our initial time. The reason why we're doing this is because we want to know how long the timer is already running. You can create a variable in this function by also using the var and the name of your variable and then the type. We will name this one GUI time. And we can make it of type float. And GUI time will be the difference between the time function and our initial time. So for example, if we'll set the initial time to 1 second and we run the on GUI function for 3 seconds, our GUI time would be 2 seconds. You might already guessed it, we also need the remaining time. To find out the remaining time, we need to subtract the GUI time from the count seconds. This difference will be stored in another variable called rest seconds. We can make this one of type integer. Private var rest seconds type integer. And rest seconds will be the difference of our count seconds minus our GUI time. The next step is really important to display our time properly in remaining seconds and remaining minutes. We will create two other variables for each minutes and seconds. You can name them seconds and minutes if you want. Both can be type integer. Down in our function on GUI, we will have to use Euclidean division to transform this rest seconds value into minutes and seconds. That's why I prepared a presentation for you. So we will use Euclidean division, and you normally use Euclidean division for finding out whether a number is even or uneven, and you also can convert decimal numbers into binary ones with this division. So this is my first example I've prepared for you. If you have a cake with 9 pieces and you have 4 people, and now you want to share this cake among those 4 people, you want to know how many pieces will be left over, you can use Euclidean division. And the result is everyone is getting 2 pieces and 1 will be left over. This would be the result of our Euclidean division. Another example for our particular use is if you have 290 seconds and you now want to express this 290 seconds in minutes and seconds. So you would calculate 290 divided by 60 would be about 4.83. So our quotient would be 4 minutes and our remainder is a 0.83 minutes. And a 0.83 minutes multiplied by 60 would be 50 seconds. So 290 would be 4 minutes and 50 seconds. And the real key part is that the Euclidean division calculates this seconds value in just one step, so we don't have to mind about multiplying with 60 or so. So let's go back out to our script. Now we can set the seconds to our rest seconds, Euclidean divided by 60, and we can set the minutes to rest seconds, normal divided by 60. To display the time on our GUI object, we have to create one last variable called text time. We'll make this one of type string because the GUI text object is only understanding string as input formats. So we can create this variable also at the top. Name this one text time and make it of type string with a capital S. Even if it changes, you can rename it. And down in our function on GUI, we will use a string.format function. String.format functions allows us to represent a text as a series of Unicode characters. Our particular string.format function would look the following. So we will be initializing our variable text time in this function, so write text time equals string text.format. And now open a round bracket. You see, you will be asked first for a format a string. You normally write format as strings with a quotation mark. So this is how our format a string will look like. The first value will be standing for an index of a variable, which we will add later on this statement, and this sign will later on divide our minutes and our seconds. And the 1 is another index for a variable. You could also add, for example, another curly bracket and then write a 2 and close this curly bracket for adding hours, for example. But we'll be using only minutes and seconds, and now we'll have to assign our variables to the indexes. So our 0 will be minutes because we want to display this first and then the seconds. And you can add the string.format function by using a rounded bracket. Finally, we need to set our text time variable to our GUI text object. We could use a getComponent function to change the text property of our GUI text. By opening the bracket of our getComponent function, we will be used for type. And our type will be GUI text. And you see this object has multiple properties, but we will change the text property and set it to our variable called text time. Let's see if this is working, so we can run it. See, we've forgotten a semicolon here at the end. Run again, and we've got no errors. So let's go back to Unity and see if this was working. We could change the count seconds to something like 5 and blade. That's 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. But it's also counting in a negative direction. To force it to stop at 0, we will use an if statement. So go back to monodevelop and write at the end of our function on GUI, if our seconds and our minutes are getting smaller or equal to null, we will pause the game. You can pause the game by using the time.timescale function. Real-time timescale would be 1. If you want to make a slow motion effect, you could use values between 0 and 1. And if you want to pause the game, you'll have to set the timescale to 0. If seconds are smaller or equal to null, and because we're using a logical AND operation, both statements have to be true, the seconds and the minutes. And our minutes are also smaller or equal to 0. Then we will do something. We could also write a comment, for example, like pause the game or show a message box. But we will also set the time scale to 0. So let's see if this one is also working. So it's counting backwards, and it stops when our timer is getting 0. Another thing we could tweak is our background color. You can do this by going to the main camera and choose a background. I think we could change it to something nice orange, like this. In the example I showed you, I also changed this font. You can get pretty good fonts on the internet. Just go to pages like Google Fonts. And you will have a great choice between multiple fonts. The one I used in the example was called Quickly. If you found the font of your choice, then you have to choose Add to Collection, and then go to this arrow which is pointing downwards and is named Download. Choose this one and download font as a zip file. After your font is downloaded, you could extract it and drag and drop your font into Unity. Next, select your GUI text and drag your font onto the font property of your GUI text. You will see an instant change. Now you could also increase the font size to something like 100. So that's it for the time being. I hope you did enjoy this tutorial. Thanks for watching.